Something satisfying is supposed to happen when you fix a problem. You name it, you treat it, and it fades. But yours keeps returning, and the fact that it keeps returning has started to feel like a second problem layered on top of the first. That recurring pattern is not a malfunction. It is the single most important clue your mind has ever handed you, and almost no one reads it correctly. By the end of this, you will. You have done the work, genuinely. The breathing protocols, the journaling apps, the therapy sessions where you said the right things and felt temporary relief wash through your nervous system like a cool wave. Some mornings, the weight lifted long enough for you to believe the chapter was over. Then, a random Tuesday evening, standing in the kitchen with nothing visibly wrong, the tightness crawled back into your chest like it had never left. A devastating question followed. What is broken in me that nothing seems to reach? That question is a trap because it assumes the anxiety itself is the disease. It is not. It is a messenger wearing the only disguise loud enough to get your attention. And everything you have tried so far has been an attempt to silence the messenger instead of reading the message. Here is what the message actually says. Somewhere along the way, you split yourself in two. One version became presentable, adaptable, impressive. The version that earns approval and avoids conflict at every turn. The other version, the one carrying your raw honesty, your unfiltered ambition, your inconvenient truths, got exiled to a place you stopped visiting a long time ago. Carl Jung described this exiled territory as the shadow, and he did not mean your dark side in some dramatic, cinematic sense. He meant every quality you learned to suppress because expressing it cost you something irreplaceable: love, safety, belonging, peace in your own home. Think about when you first learned that your anger made people uncomfortable. Maybe it was a parent's expression shifting the instant your voice rose. Maybe a teacher corrected your tone while the boy next to you said the same thing louder and received praise for his confidence. That lesson did not eliminate the anger. It taught the anger to burrow, to compress itself into a dense knot, to hide inside physical symptoms that no doctor could trace to a single origin. Your body became the storage unit for everything your social world refused to hold. Now consider the mask you constructed in response to all of this. Jung called it the persona, the curated self you present before anyone earns your trust. You know this mask intimately because you built it with extraordinary precision over many years. It knows which laugh to offer in meetings, which posture communicates warmth without vulnerability, which version of your opinion is safe enough to share over dinner without creating tension. For years, this mask kept you employed, included, and emotionally protected from situations that could have shattered you. But protection always carries a hidden cost. The cost here is distance, an ever-expanding gap between who you perform and who you actually are beneath the performance. Anxiety lives in that gap. It thrives in the friction generated between your public shape and your private truth, and no relaxation technique on earth can close a structural divide. You cannot breathe your way out of living a fundamentally split life. There's a deeper current running beneath all of this that rarely gets discussed in mainstream conversations about mental health. Jung identified an energy he called the animus, a fierce, clarifying force that culture has historically discouraged women from accessing. Not aggression in the reckless or destructive sense, but the kind of precise, unshakable power that allows someone to say, "This is what I know to be true, and I will not abandon it simply to preserve your comfort." When that energy has nowhere to go, when every external channel is blocked by social expectation or silent judgment, it does not dissolve. It reverses direction entirely. Turned inward, it becomes the catastrophic thinking that haunts your sleepless hours, the mental simulations of disaster that never match reality. The persistent inner voice insisting something terrible is approaching without ever specifying what that something might be. You have spent years fighting that voice, and the fighting is precisely what feeds it. Resistance gives it structure, opposition gives it renewed purpose, and the act of suppression gives it the one resource it needs to survive: your full attention, aimed in the wrong direction. So what would happen if you stopped fighting altogether? Not surrendering to the anxiety, but surrendering the deeply held idea that anxiety is the enemy you need to defeat. Your nervous system operates like an inverted compass. It does not point toward where you should go. It points with startling accuracy toward everything you have been refusing to face. Every spike of panic, every wave of dread, every night spent staring at the ceiling while the house sleeps around you is a coordinate, marking a territory inside your own psychology that holds something essential you once abandoned. The paradox cuts deep and clean. The very thing you avoid contains exactly what you need to feel whole again. If something in these words is reaching a place you usually keep guarded, do not close that door. What you are feeling right now has weight and meaning that extends far beyond this moment. This channel exists to give language to experiences most people endure in total isolation, and your presence here is already evidence that something in you is ready to listen differently than you ever have before. Subscribing is not about algorithms or numbers or any metric that lives on a screen. It is about choosing to return to this conversation again, about building a practice of looking inward with guidance rather than doing it alone in the dark at 3 in the morning. Hit subscribe because the next time you need these words, they should already be waiting for you. Now let us go deeper, because understanding the mechanism is only the beginning of the real journey. Jung believed the most significant undertaking a human being could pursue was something he called individuation, the gradual, often uncomfortable process of becoming who you actually are, beneath every inherited expectation and borrowed identity you have accumulated across a lifetime. Individuation does not ask you to destroy your anxiety or override it with positive thinking. It asks you to follow your anxiety like a thread through a labyrinth, trusting that it leads to a center you forgot existed. Behind every wall of dread, something precious lies buried and waiting, a truth you stopped speaking because the consequences of honesty seemed worse than the slow corrosion of silence. A desire you reclassified as selfish the moment it threatened someone else's comfort or challenged the role assigned to you. A capacity so vast it genuinely frightened the people around you, so you made it small enough to be forgiven for possessing it. Retrieving these buried fragments is the actual work of healing, and it looks nothing like what self-help culture has trained you to expect. The process does not begin with a dramatic breakthrough or a single revelatory moment. It begins with a dream you usually dismiss, the one that keeps cycling back every few months with slight variations, as though your unconscious is resubmitting a proposal you keep rejecting without reading it fully. An emotion rising during the most ordinary moments can serve as the entry point. Grief surfacing while folding laundry, a flash of rage while sitting in traffic, sudden tenderness toward the child you used to be before the world taught her to shrink. The unconscious does not communicate through arguments and evidence the way your rational mind prefers. It speaks fluently in sensation, image, and timing, and learning its particular language is the closest thing to a genuine cure your anxiety has ever been offered. This process resembles a slow thaw far more than a lightning bolt. Layer by layer, the frozen architecture you constructed around your authentic self begins to soften in ways that surprise you. A sentence surfaces in a quiet moment, something like, "I am willing to see what I have been hiding from all these years." That willingness, spoken without performance, without even needing to say it out loud to another person,
is the key that fits the lock your anxiety has been pounding against since before you had language to describe what was happening inside you. When the door finally opens, the relief takes a shape you did not anticipate. The anxiety does not vanish in a sudden burst of light or clarity. Instead, the real question beneath the anxiety finally becomes audible for the first time in your life. The authentic tension was never purely chemical, though brain chemistry can certainly amplify the signal beyond what feels survivable. The authentic tension was architectural, a life built on a foundation that no longer matches the person standing on it. Your public identity pulling in one direction, while your authentic self pulls in another, the constant strain between them generating a distress signal your body can only translate as panic. Once you begin gathering the exiled pieces of yourself, reintegrating the anger you buried, the ambition you disguised as modesty, the desires you permanently banished from polite conversation, the signal starts to change in ways you can feel. Jung observed that people immersed in this process of reintegration began experiencing what he called synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that appear too precisely timed to be random chance. A conversation with a stranger that answers a question you had not yet voiced out loud to anyone. A book falling open to a passage that mirrors a private decision you had been wrestling with for months in silence. Opportunities arriving in unexpected clusters after what felt like years of stagnation and closed doors. This is not mystical thinking or wishful fantasy dressed in intellectual language. When you stop dividing your energy between a real self and a performed self, you suddenly possess enough attention to notice connections that were always present around you. The world did not secretly rearrange itself on your behalf. You simply stopped being too internally divided to perceive it accurately. One final truth before you go, and I want this one to remain with you long after the screen goes dark and you return to the demands of your daily life. Your anxiety is not proof of damage or deficiency. It is proof of something indestructible inside you that refuses to accept a reduced version of your own existence. Every accelerated heartbeat carries that refusal. Every spiral of obsessive thought echoes it, and every pressure building in your chest confirms that your deepest self is still awake, still actively protesting, still insisting with every signal available that you were not designed for the small container you have been living inside. That insistence deserves your respect, not your resistance. A part of you has carried decades of quiet endurance, navigating complex systems that consistently rewarded your compliance while punishing every attempt at wholeness. The moment she recognizes that her anxiety was always the voice of her own completeness calling her home, something settles that no prescription or technique could ever manufacture. Not the absence of hardship, but the bone-deep knowing that she can meet whatever life presents because she is no longer waging war against herself. That recognition does not require perfect circumstances or ideal timing. It requires one single choice, repeated gently and without judgment, to look inward with curiosity rather than fear, with genuine compassion rather than harsh criticism. The rest unfolds organically, because it always has for every person who made that quiet, brave pivot before you. Start now, today, not armed with answers, but simply carrying willingness. The answers have always known exactly where to find you.